In this video lesson, we'll explore some of the strengths of the Articles of Confederation, as well as Daniel Shays' rebellion, which leads the founders to create a new government. The Congress of the Confederation's two main achievements were that it acquired and organized Western lands ceded by the states to become part of the national domain, and it held the nation together long enough for a new and more effective Constitution to be written. Appointed by Congress to draft a policy for the national domain, Thomas Jefferson proposed 5 actions. He proposed dividing the Northwest Territory into as many as 10 new states, surveying and dividing the new states into townships, which were 10 square miles, and giving land to settlers to encourage settlement and generate future tax revenue and avoid speculation in land sales. States with representative government equal in status with the 13 states once they reached a certain population, and prohibition of slavery. Congress passes the Land Ordinance of 1784, adopting parts of Jefferson's plan, calling for 10 states surveyed into townships, guaranteeing territorial self-government and eventual statehood, but it did not outlaw slavery or provide for giving land to settlers. Since the first ordinance provided enough guidelines as to how land should be released, Congress later passed the Land Ordinance of 1785, revising the Land Ordinance of 1784. This law set up procedures for surveying, mapping, and selling the land. The Land Ordinance of 1785 provided for the creation of 3 to 5 states in the Northwest Territory, each with boundaries conforming to natural geographic features, surveyed into townships which were 6 miles square, with each township to be further surveyed into 36 sections 1 mile square. So one section equaled 640 acres. The Land Ordinance of 1785 also provided that minimum purchases be in sections of 640 acres, one section in each township to be reserved for the establishment of schools. The map that is seen here shows surveying the Old Northwest under the Land Ordinance of 1785 and shows dividing sections of a township into the 36 sections and one section equaling 640 acres. Here is a picture, an illustration of the township, and then here is one of those squares broken down into acreage. Each section of 640 acres could be further subdivided into half sections, as can be seen here. 320 acres, quarter sections, which were 160 acres, half-quarter sections, which were 80 acres, and quarter sections, which were 40 acres. An acre is about the size of a football field. The ordinance stipulated land would be sold at public auction for a minimum price of $1 an acre, to be paid in hard currency, which was currency backed by reserves of precious metals or certificates of debt. These stipulations meant that the land's first purchasers were wealthy land speculators who could afford the $640 minimum purchase price. Many of them held the land for resale rather than living on it themselves. Lastly, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, one of the most important pieces of the Confederation's legislation. The Northwest Ordinance specified 3 stages of territorial development and a transition to statehood. At every stage, a territory's inhabitants were subject to taxation to support the Union. The ordinance specified a territorial stage in which Congress appoints officials governed under an adopted legal code and appointed local magistrate. Next phase is when the white male population of legal voting age and land-owning status reached 5,000 people. The people could elect a territorial legislature and a non-voting delegate to sit on Congress. And then, upon reaching a population of 60,000, a territory could draft and submit a proposed constitution to Congress and apply for an act of admission to the Union and be admitted as a state. The ordinance provided for the orderly and successful expansion of the United States in the century to come. Slavery in the Northwest Territory was forbidden by the 1787 law, giving rise to the gradual abolition of slavery in the North and to North-South sectionalism in future years. Finally, the land ordinance also recognized Indian claims in the region, stating the utmost good faith shall always be observed towards the Indians. Their lands and property shall never be taken from them without their consent, and in their property, rights, and liberty they shall never be invaded or disturbed, unless in just and lawful wars authorized by Congress. In the 1780s, Congress struggled to govern under the Articles and begged states to give them tax revenue to keep the government running. Efforts to pass a tax amendment had already failed, and revenue from land sales in the Northwest Territory were not yet realized. States themselves struggled to retire Revolutionary War debts, to contend with overburdened taxpayers, and to deal with rebellious farmers resisting state authorities who demanded tax payments in hard currency. In Massachusetts, officials sought to retire state debts by raising taxes, a politically unpopular option to solve the state's financial problems. Between 1782 and July of 1786, the Massachusetts legislature failed to address farmers' petitions, leading to calls for constitutional revisions. They wanted to eliminate the legislature's upper house and move the capital farther west, away from the elite Eastern establishment's control. In the fall of 1786, Daniel Shays, a veteran of the Continental Army, who was a captain, and other leaders led armed takeovers of the county courts, which were visible symbols of states' authority. Known collectively as Shays' Rebellion of 1786, these Western uprisings were labeled by Massachusetts Governor James Bowdoin as illegal challenges to state authority. Daniel Shays and other protesters believed that the state government had become tyrannical and unresponsive. They had returned from the American Revolution only to find their farms in danger of bankruptcy and them having to pay back large amounts of debt. And they felt, because they had served their country in the American Revolution, that this was something that should not have been happening to them. Sympathetic local militias did nothing to stop the takeover of the county courts. If the county courts could be closed, then the farmers in Massachusetts could be sure that their farms would not be taken from them. The Confederation Congress, worried that events in Massachusetts might spread to other states, passed legislation in October 1786 tripling the Army's size, an effort which failed to generate enough recruits to deal with the problems in Massachusetts. Governor Bowdoin responded to Congress's failure by hiring a private army of approximately 3,000 men to deal with the Western Rebellion. In January 1787, Bowdoin's army fought the Shayites near a Springfield armory, a weapons storage site that the rebels had tried to seize. In February, Bowdoin's army attacked the Shayites again at Petersham, Massachusetts, and defeated them, after which dissidents were rounded up, jailed, and put on trial. Shays' rebellion raised fears among the country's leaders that the Articles' weaknesses, if they were not corrected, would lead to another revolution. In September 1786, Madison and Congress called for a meeting in Annapolis, Maryland, to amend the Articles, and only 5 states participated. The incidents of Shays' rebellion showed the founders that something was wrong with the government and that it was not strong enough to deal with the issues of taxation.